Well, I think Lacey set me up really well. Actually, you all set me up really well, because the minister started, we've had a number, University of British Columbia brought a delegation over to Finland earlier this year. There was a delegation of government and industry and NGOs and academics from New Brunswick and Nova Scotia who are just over in Finland. Your delegations come here. I know there's going to be another delegation from Canada going to Finland, I think in the spring next year. We can learn a lot from Finland. Jeff, you had on your slides, whether it's 30 or 50 bioeconomy, I think the point is we don't have one in Canada, and I think we can learn a lot from the Finns. And in our meetings yesterday, I was really struck by some of the Finnish businesses who are working in Canada right now in this space and the opportunity to do more. So that's been excellent. Lacey, so you set me up really well. I'm gonna do a bit of a level set on forestry in Canada. I'm gonna cut a few things out, but because you've covered it nicely. I want to talk about a different imperative. Haley outlined a number of the imperatives around innovation and the huge opportunities. I'm going to talk about fire. We got a huge fire problem in Canada, and the bioeconomy and finding markets for low-grade wood and using every part of that tree and using some of the stuff that's dying or dead in the bush for higher value is absolutely critical. It's critical to improving air quality. It's critical to addressing our biggest carbon emissions problem in Canada, which is fire. It's critical so we can stop seeing Indigenous and non-Indigenous communities in the north being evacuated in a fire season that's now shockingly starting almost in the late winter and running into the early winter. That's where we're at in Canada right now. So I lead the National Forest Industry Association here based in Ottawa. I want to recognize my colleague Catherine Smith, who's in, I don't want to embarrass you, but I just saw you out there. So these are the companies and employees of these companies who we are so proud to represent. And most of the work we do here in our sector is not done without national and regional Indigenous partners. Without our local, we're a heavily unionized sector, so the work that we do with Unifor and United Steelworkers is absolutely critical. And the work that we do with mayors and councillors and local chambers of commerce, we are the lifeblood of over 300 communities in Canada. And our goal is to keep it that way and to grow this industry as we face some of these challenges. And the challenges are real. And, we've got a softwood lumber dispute with a $10 billion, that's billion dollars of Canadian money that's sitting in the U.S. Treasury that cannot be reinvested in our operations and in our people. President-elect Trump announced a 25% tariff on January the 20th last night when I was at the hockey game last night, so it took me out to do a little bit of work. But again, these are real risks to the Canadian economy and the importance of getting organized. And when I saw the UK, the different regulations and rules, I was a bit triggered because we feel that in Canada as well. And if we're going to drive this, we need to streamline some of that stuff. So. The minister mentioned in Finland 75. There's I think it's 75% of, or no, is covered. How many forest owners? It was
over 630,000. 630,000
forest owners in Canada. We're all forest owners. These are the people's trees. 94% of the lands on which we're working are in the purview of the provinces, and that's really critical. And that's a unique factor for Canada. You look at the U.S., 80% private land, significant private land forestry in most other developed countries around the world. And what comes with that public land responsibility, as Lacey laid out, is a tremendous amount of commitment to consultation and community engagement and doing right on the land base. I also want to reinforce that the harvest levels in Canada, as Lacey talked about, 1% available. Less than half of our forests. Jeff talked about 9% of the world's forests being here in Canada, almost 40% of the world's independently third-party certified forests. We should be pretty proud of that. But less than half of our forests are actually on the managed land base. And half of that forest area today is under some kind of a conservation measure, whether it's a temporary measure for a caribou calving ground or a turtle crossing, or a longer-term conservation measure. The diligence and care that Lacey and others on the land place in forest management planning is very real. And picking up on Lacey's point here, I'm going to pivot. I'm going to show a video. It's under 3 minutes, but I want to bring you into the forest, and I want you to see some of the impacts of the fire and the real imperative to do more And coming out of that video, I'm going to talk very briefly about the Canadian opportunity and what needs to be done, I think, and some of the international momentum I think we're seeing to do more here. But Lacey talked about trees not living forever, and in the boreal forest of Canada, which is the largest swath of forest we have across from northern British Columbia across to Labrador, is a natural fire-prone landscape. And so when trees, I was in a stand in the Kenora Forest in northwestern Ontario, 80, 90-year stand, and the pests were coming in, the insects were coming in. That the local Indigenous contractor was very concerned, if we can't get in to harvest this is going to burn, it's going to fall over. We're going to lose the economic opportunity. On this graph taken from the National Forest Inventory, you look here, 61 to 140, the majority of trees in Canada's boreal are starting to get pretty old. And as the climate continues to get hotter, as drought conditions persist, as pests get in there, our forests are going to become kindling if there's not a new approach. So let me take you into the forest for less than 3 minutes, and then I'll pivot over to some of the opportunities, I think, in terms of what Canada and the world could be doing to turn this around, and then we'll get into the discussion.
It's a piece of the fire that burned through this area. It was a really catastrophic fire, several thousand hectares in size.
You know, our climate is really changing. Since 2017, we have experienced catastrophic fires with the burning and the smoke that's emitted off these wildfires, a tremendous amount of carbon release into our atmosphere. We can't afford to have that continue to happen in our atmosphere, and there is a role for forestry and harvesting to be able to mitigate some of those effects of these large wildfires.
The climate emergency in the planet is one area where I think forests can and should be part of the solution. We can understand better trees as carbon sequestering machines, and we can help these trees to do the things that they do best.
This area is high priority for us, and looking at the health of the stands and looking at how we're getting creative, diversify how we harvest the forest in a way that there's more longevity and we do have it and can utilize it for future generations, while at the same time also protecting homes in light of potential wildfire activity in the future.
You know, the world is desperate for solutions to climate change and the carbon dioxide crisis, and building with wood is really a serious solution to combat climate change. This is a way of removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and storing it in the form of these beautiful buildings.
I really believe right now that architecture has a big role to play in changing some of the big problems we have in the world, whether that's housing or contributing to climate change. What I love about designing and building with wood, it sequesters carbon in the body of the material. Why not use renewable materials that can be sustainably harvested and actually pull the carbon out of the atmosphere? I think we have to be open to change. Issues have come to the fore that we just can't continue to do things the way we did. How we make change in society is we change expectations.
So that's more of a mass timber angle, which is a huge opportunity for us as that market continues to grow and develop. And I think Canada, I think there's a lot of conversation with Scandinavia and Austria and other leaders in that space. But I do think, Jeff, I think over the years, I think one thing we talked about a few years ago is the need to get more people from different sectors. Where are the airlines? Where's oil and gas with forestry and agriculture? And I think this has come a long way. I think this is really, really critical to addressing some of these issues and stop talking to ourselves as a forest or an agriculture sector, right, in terms of branching out. So a couple things, there's going to be a lot of talk over the next couple of days around innovation and technologies, and that's great stuff. But I wanted to hone in today on the health and resilience of our forests and on fire, because I think that's an imperative that's often not thought about or talked about. when we're considering the bioeconomy. One of the things, one of the solutions, we need to see more proactive management. I think one of the other things that delegations who've gone to Finland and Sweden have come back to say is, wow, they're really getting a lot more fiber out of a similar size plot of land than we are in Canada. It's a much more intensive, and if you look at the fire or the lack of fire, I think that's a testament to how the management of forests, how that's happening in places like Finland and Sweden. So we need to see from our provincial and federal governments a much more thoughtful, proactive approach to thinning dense, aging forests to reduce these risks, and more fire breaks around communities. And for any of our municipal partners in the room, you need money to do that. Our municipalities, you talk to any mayor of any community that's been hit by fire in the last few years, a year or 2 or 3 after the fire, everybody still is worried about the fire, but then at some point the hockey arena needs to be fixed and the water system needs upgrades, and there's only so much money. So sustainable funding for our municipalities who are at risk of fire, and education for those communities around the importance of fire breaking and protecting those communities by thinning and active management. So I'm going to close here with just maybe some thought starters and some things that we're working on with FPAC. I think coming out of some of the catastrophic fires in California and across the western United States, we've seen the U.S. government invest heavily in what they're calling a wildland fire crisis plan. And what that is, that's an investment in aggressive mapping to see where fire-prone zones might be, and getting in there to treat those areas to get that at-risk fiber out. We need to see that kind of a commitment in Canada. We also need, I think I've been quite constructively critical of the current government in its rollout of its climate plan and its national adaptation strategy. The forest industry has more to offer than just tree planting. We're very good at it. We do 400 to 600 million seedlings a year. There's a lot of trees being planted in Canada, and we're very good at it. But our full value chain solutions in terms of the decarbonization of our lime kilns, the build with wood, moving more from truck to rail, being more proactive in managing to address fire risks. We need a more comprehensive action plan, and finding markets for low-grade wood is an important part of that. Green procurement in terms of how government, through building systems, through biomass, through building with wood, can really lead the way through more demonstration projects and through green procurement. And let's get moving with investment tax credits in this country. In response to the U.S. Inflation Reduction Act, there was a move to address that gulf, but many of us are still waiting for investment tax credits for biomass, heat and electricity generation, for example. I see Bradley's up, so I'm just going to pick up on a couple things the minister spoke to. We need a more integrated strategy, and I think we can learn a lot from the Finns and the Swedes. The G7 is with Canada in 2025, so our government is going to be leading on the G7. And when I was in Italy a few weeks ago, Italian government officials were very clear. We need Canada not to drop the bioeconomy from the G7 agenda. A lot of progress has been made. Let's keep it. The minister spoke about the G20 work. I think there's a lot we can learn on from there. And also, I know the United Nations Forum on Forests in Austria are doing some work on the bioeconomy through UNFF platforms as well. So lots we can tap into, huge momentum happening internationally. It's time to move some of that action back to Canada. So thanks.